Now, autism is an invisible disability that affects 700,000 people in the UK, but it's a condition that remarkably little is known about.
Now, a new book argues that too much time has been spent on trying to find a cure, and there should be more focus on helping autistic people integrate into society.
Well, joining us now is the author of that book, Steve Silberman. Also here is Anna Kennedy, whose two sons have autism and who set up a school for autistic children. Morning to you both. Thank you very much for joining us. Steve, just tell us a little bit about what you've tried to do in this book.
Well, there's been a tendency of late to see autism as some kind of modern plague that was the result of vaccines or Wi-Fi or whatever. Autistic people have always been part of society, but they were hidden in previous generations. Autistic people who were profoundly disabled were put in institutions. Their families were actually told never to speak of them, so they became invisible to society. Other parts of what we now call the autism spectrum, people were just considered odd or eccentric. Now what has happened is that in the 1980s and 1990s, the diagnostic criteria for autism were considerably broadened, so more families could get help and more people could get diagnoses. But what we haven't done yet is to fully commit to integrating those people into society and helping children, as I'm sure you can attest.
Well, Anna, just tell us, explain first of all your own experience. You have your two sons.
Yeah, I have two sons, Patrick and Angelo. Patrick's 25, he has Asperger's syndrome, and Angelo is 22, and he has quite severe autism, sensory processing condition, and nocturnal epilepsy.
Well, we can see you with your boys there. Oh, yeah. So how does what Steve is talking about fit in with your own experiences?
Well, basically what happened was where I lived in the borough, there was just nothing at all for my boys. That basically the ball was in my court, so it was up to me to try and find provision. So in the end, what we did was we remortgaged our home and we set up a school, Hillingdon Manor, which is now one of the biggest schools for children with autism in the UK. And basically a lot of these children would either have late diagnosis or being bullied in school and not just recently being accepted by society. So I totally agree with what Steve's saying. I think his book is actually very, very good. It's a fantastic tool for families, for parents, for adults themselves affected by autism. And all they want really is family, is for their children to be accepted in society, to be given the same opportunities as everybody else, especially with diagnosis at the moment. We did a survey over 2 years ago, and 2,000 families actually filled out a questionnaire that we did, just 10 simple questions about how long did it take to get a diagnosis, and it was 5 years on average. That's a long time in a child's life when early intervention's crucial.
I know spent a week with about 70 people with autism. And how did that affect you? What did that make you think?
Well, I realized that many of the sort of clinical cliches about looking at autistic people as only checklists of deficits and impairments were just not true. They were full human beings. They were witty. They were, in fact, had a very fine sense of humor. It was believed for a long time that autistic people have no sense of humor. So I did that at the very beginning of my research process for the book, and it made me realize that I really needed to look at autistic people with fresh eyes to see them in the full breadth of their humanity.
So, Anna, you mentioned the issue of diagnosis, which clearly is so important. Aside from that, what part does medical science have in the condition? If you say this is much more about what happens, the quality of life, as opposed to what part medical science has to do with it. I just think that
Society's perception as well of autism is still, in a way, still quite backward, really, because when I talk to some parents, they might say, oh, all I know about autism, or even professionals to this day and age, is they think of the film Rain Man, but everyone's not like Rain Man. I've heard as well in schools that some teachers and some professionals says, oh, I've worked with a child with autism, so I know everything that there is to know about autism. Yeah. No, you don't. You know about that child and how it presents itself in that child. So really, we need to be looking at these children. They can offer so much to society. My son has just started an apprenticeship, and you can see the difference in him now, walking out proud. He's now talking about getting his own flat. He's never, ever said anything like that. And they can offer so much to society. So businesses really just need to look at these individuals and think, what can I do to support this adult. And it's just sometimes just small, reasonable adjustments that can really help the adult. And all they want is just the same as everyone else, to have a good education, to basically have a girlfriend, to have a family, to have their own place, and not to be seen as second-class citizens. I put on a show in London called Autism's Got Talent, and quite a few people came to see the show. And it's fantastic, and I think some of them came to see the show as if it was like tokenistic, you know, oh, let's go and see the little autistic children and adults. They were wowed, and they walked out and said, we didn't expect to be entertained. Why wouldn't you? These children and adults have just got so much to offer. They just need to be given the opportunity.
Well, your passion shines through.
It's absolutely brilliant. Steve, attitudes. I mean, how then do you change attitudes, the ones that Anna's been talking about?
Well, here's the thing. If we treat autistic people as only groups of things that they can't do instead of what they can do, once an autistic person is able to prove that they're an expert at something, and many of them have a very, very deep expertise in a subject of their own fascination, they gain confidence and they gain ability. And that's, in a sense, the cure for autism is in parents who believe in their children's potential, like Anna, and in teachers who believe that the children are capable of more that is not obvious at first. And in communities that welcome autistic people into the community instead of segregating them.
I'm just interested, Annie, you talked about what your sons have achieved. You clearly have been a huge part of that process because you've been so passionate yourself. You haven't accepted. Is your fear that there are a lot of people who are not in that position, who are slipping through that net?
It's really hard to live with autism, and I live with it 24/7. I've got the T-shirt, if you like. But you've got parents who are just like so overwhelmed because I get 3 to 4 hours sleep a night, and that has an impact on my day. I don't know how I keep going, to be honest with you, but I've just got something inside of me. But a lot of parents are just so worn out. You know, sometimes they can split up a family because it has a real impact on the family. So you've got mums or even dads looking after their children, trying to hold down jobs, not sleeping, trying to support their children and adults. A lot of them don't have friends because they're just seen as, you know, a bit odd or weird. But if people just took the time to get to know a child with autism, my son's working at the garage, they're fascinated by him. They used to switch the radio on, but they don't now. They just listen to him as he's working. And he's just got so much knowledge, but he can see he's thriving. So that's all we're asking for is, and for the government as well, stop making these cuts. These families are desperate. They need support. They're not second-class citizens. They're just families who just want support for their children, and it can be just really something quite small that can make a difference.
Anna, you're amazing.
Steve, Anna's taken up all the time.
No problem. It's beautiful to hear.
It's really good to see you this morning.
Thank you so much.
Thank you so much.
And Steve's book is called Neurotribes, The Legacy of Autism and the Future of Neurodiversity.